The word of the year for Formula 1 2022 has been porpoising, the phenomenon caused by the new changes in aerodynamic regulations. More aerodynamics is now being generated from under the car as opposed to on top of the car, and it's resulting in cars being a little bit bouncy. Now, in the weeks leading up to the recent Grand Prix in Baku, drivers have been more and more vocal over this phenomenon and how it might actually be affecting the driver's health. Now for this, I'm going to aim to look at both sides of the argument because there are two sides, and then I will allow you to make up your own decisions down in the comments. Because while it is the two Mercedes drivers speaking up about back pain and discomfort that makes all the headlines, the effect that it's having is affecting all of the drivers. Well, except Alonso, he doesn't seem to care. And after the race in Baku, there was the usual vitriol directed at Hamilton. He's faking it, he's acting, he's playing it for the cameras, he's trying to find excuses because Mercedes beating him and so on. But once again, this is not just a Mercedes issue. Magnussen said he had nerve issues back in Australia. Gasly recently said something needs to be done to avoid them needing a walking stick by the time they're 30. And Ricciardo, like Hamilton, was pictured holding his back after the race last weekend. Ricciardo also said something along the lines of it being like a basketball dribbled very close to the ground. Now this might seem odd. We have seen that the Mercedes does have very violent porpoising. It's like slamming into the ground, whereas the other cars seem to be doing it more like that, if that makes any sense. This is probably the best way I'm going to be able to describe it, if I'm being honest. But then there are concerns that even with this flutter porpoising, if you want to call it that, there is concerns for mini concussions. As we've seen in recent years, concussions do happen in motorsport. Dario Franchitti and Dale Jr. had their careers ended because of concussions, and it wasn't until around 2016 or so that IndyCar really started to take concussions seriously, and this was after Will Power crashed at St. Petersburg. And it was a mild crash, all things considered. He got out and he walked away. But then after qualifying, he got out of the car and had headaches, dizziness, brain fog, and all the symptoms of an undiagnosed concussion. And at the time, concussions only happened in the NFL, the NHL and rugby, proper full-on contact sports. Now racing drivers were susceptible to them, and we're seeing more in English football as well, with heading the ball also potentially being a contributor to brain damage over the course of a career. Look at the case of Jeff Assel and his CTE, and while you're there, also Google Chris Benoit, the WWE wrestler, and what he did to his own family as a result of that same condition. So you've got some of the drivers wanting them to look into things, but on the other hand, you've got Christian Horner who's basically saying, no. It is clear that now Red Bull has got the better car over Ferrari. They've brought some upgrades at pretty much every race, and Leclerc's 2 retirements have got Verstappen back up there, despite Verstappen having 2 retirements of his own. Horner has said that it's not fair to change the rules because other teams, i.e. his, have done a better job. And you would be in your right mind to agree with him even if you are someone who wouldn't mind punching his face into a placenta. Horner's argument is basically just raise your ride height, but then that kicks the ball back into the garden of the other teams. They're not going to want to raise that ride height because they'll raise the ride height, it will slow them down, and Red Bull will just keep on winning races because they don't need to do anything. The other teams will be quick to remind Horner that he's already asked for rule changes twice this season. One to do with the minimum weight, and if you remember a couple of weeks ago I did a thing on how he was trying to get the budget cap raised because Red Bull had pretty much spaffed their budget away already this season. So while Christian Horner is saying, why should we change the rules because we've done better than you, the other teams are going to say, well, why should we raise the budget cap because you can't use a spreadsheet? This isn't just Christian Horner and Toto Wolff, or Horner or Wolff or Horner. It's all the teams looking to protect their own interests. Red Bull will want to spend more money to stay at the front. Mercedes will want a minimum ride height to close the gap. Williams will want something so they get one over Haas. Alpine will want something so they get one over on McLaren or Aston Martin, and so on. And as Ron Dennis pointed out back in the 90s, why spend money to fix something when you can just do it in the rulebook instead? Fixing something might cost you several million. One is free. Take the free option. Free up the budget. Giga brain moment. It also has to be said that every single car is porpoising and nobody is immune from it. Some drivers are just able to cope with it better than others, and some teams are able to cope with it better than others. Now, Checo and Max are understandably quite quiet about all of this, but, with them being rattled around in the cockpit, you might think in the long run it might do them damage, even though it doesn't look particularly violent, I guess is the word, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So it's a case of what does the FIA see this as? Because you'd bet your last pound coin that the teams will see this as an issue that's been caused by the regulations, while Red Bull will just say, not my problem. And they would, because they're the ones benefiting. Now, people have been saying just give them active suspension, but I don't see how that's a fix. Wouldn't the active suspension need to be designed around the suspension on the cars, which is pretty much unique to each team? And if they do bring in an active suspension or a spec active suspension, would that in turn require spec suspension, which needs to work with the rest of the cars? But yeah, I don't know. I'm not an engineer or a doctor. But it's a bit of a mad one, this, and I don't really have an answer, so I might go looking for an answer, and that answer might come from you in the comments. What do you think of all this? And just please try to not make this a Lewis Hamilton Mercedes hate session, because I don't have the time or the crayons to explain to you that it's happening to everybody, not just Mercedes. But if you think you can put together a constructive argument, then leave it in the comments section underneath this video. And while you're scrolling down, if you haven't already, subscribe and also get the bell on so never miss out on any future content from this channel. Massive thanks as ever to the kind folk of Patreon for their continued support, and if you want to help fund the purchases of some more up-to-date pictures to be used in videos, you can join the nice people on your screen by following the link in the description to Patreon, along with finding links to Discord and also to my socials. So until next time, I've been Aidan. Have a great day wherever you live in the world, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. Goodbye.